In the last couple of years, it's no secret, customer acquisition costs are going one way and one way only. It's putting undue pressure on bottom lines of e-com P&Ls all over the world. You're in this situation now, and you guys must see this as well, where the heaviest line item of the whole P&L for a lot of these brands is now their marketing budget. In that instance, whoever is responsible for deploying this capital on behalf of my business, they're essentially the largest investor in my business. And in no other industry will we allow the largest investor in the company to be held to account by metrics that are not financially orientated and that can be gamed depending on which attribution window you want to look at. So for me, first and foremost, as a business owner, if I was running an e-com store, I would want to understand how much did we spend last week? Did we make more profit on that? Then get down into figuring out, okay, where did those orders come from? But if we don't have that core fundamental piece first, it's extremely difficult to confidently spend money and know that we're making the right decisions every week.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Latest podcast. I'm joined today by Thomas Gleeson from StoreHero. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Ed. Really looking forward to getting into this one.
Thank you. Well, I know we've been banging on the space a bit together, and I know StoreHero a bit, but tell the audience here, what does StoreHero do for the brands you work for?
StoreHero is a SaaS platform to help e-commerce brands centralize all of their e-commerce data in Shopify, Amazon, all of their marketing channels, and most importantly, from our perspective, their finances. And really what we're trying to do is help brands at its core understand, as they're turning up and down the dials from a paid media standpoint, are they able to generate more profitability?
And is it a particular kind of size of brand this is particularly relevant for, or do you see this sort of just relevance across the spectrum?
Yeah, all shapes and sizes. So we have about 650 e-commerce brands using StoreHero. They're starting from businesses who are thinking about starting and want to get, make sure that as they scale the skyscraper that they're planning to build, that they're building that core foundation correctly before they kind of scale the building. And then we also have brands all the way up to, doing it up into the kind of north nine figures kind of territory as well. So really, really broad mix across all different types of industries too.
And what was the genesis? So we in this sort of working as an analyst before in the space or different kind of business?
I wish it was as glamorous as that, Ed. So long story short, I grew up with e-commerce really, really randomly. So I'm from the west coast of Ireland, as any of your listeners can probably hear. But yeah, my mother has had an e-commerce business for 21 years. So I grew up hearing about broken checkouts and abandoned carts and MOQs and all this kind of crack. And I suppose, we just kind of grew up with it. We were doing SEO on her website literally when we were 10 and 11 years of age. And that business grew for, I think, 11 years, Ed, primarily and only through SEO, which is a pipe stream.
What was it about that?
It's personalized baby gifts, wedding gifts, Christmas gifts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that business was SEO only for 11 years. That's a pipe dream for anybody running e-com today. So around 2015, 16, I discovered this thing called the Facebook Pixel. And, it was amazing. For the first time, I could track, return on this ad spend, not just my clicks. I could track revenue coming in from these attributed ads. I had this ROAS figure that I'd never seen before. It took me a while to wrap my head around. The challenge with it was my dad. My dad is kind of an older school accountant, and, accountants by their nature, Ed, just absolutely hate marketing. So I was going to him as I started spending money. I was like, Dad, the ROAS from Facebook and Google, it's great. We're putting in 1 into this machine and we're getting back 10, which we were back in the day. Obviously not anymore. But anyway, he was, initially we were all quite excited by it. But after a while, as I was looking for more and more money every week, he was like, what does this number even mean? Can you just talk me through it? And when the deeper we got into it, he was like, you're telling me that Facebook and Google can probably claim the same sale. You're telling me that they're including your VAT as part of your revenue. You're telling me that they're not taking into account all of our cost of goods, our shipping costs, our labor, blah, blah, blah. And he said, look, Thomas, to be fair and being honest with you, thanks for all the work, but we're going to pull the budget here because I have no confidence in these numbers. I probably thought he was a bit of a dinosaur at the time, but, what he did force me to do was build out a complex spreadsheet to figure out kind of, unit economics and profitability for this business. And he said, look, if you can come back to me every week with an update on we spent X, we generated more profit, you can have as much money as you want. And that spreadsheet took a little bit longer than I probably would have liked to kind of put together, but it was really, really impactful. From there, I obviously had a couple of e-commerce brands myself, but I did actually spend 3.5 years working at a little known company called Shopify, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So it's initially started out in customer support and kind of worked through a number of different roles into kind of a more senior merchant success manager, account manager for some of the biggest brands in the UK. And for me, that was a dream job. I went to Shopify to learn how to run an e-commerce brand. I said, if I'm going to run a brand, and that was, that's what I wanted to do. The best place for me to go and work and speak to e-com founders every day. And I got that in spades at Shopify. So the merchant success manager role there was helping brands understand their Shopify roadmap, marketing strategy, and general business acumen. I started showing the spreadsheet to a lot of the brands I was working with. And, lo and behold, the challenges that we had at our kitchen table at home between my mom, who maybe is the product person and the marketing person, and then aligning with the big bad finance person who actually sets the rules and sets the budgets. Yeah. That was a dynamic that plays out in every e-com business. Yeah. And I was trying to be the glue in the middle, I suppose, with the spreadsheet. And to be honest with you, that's kind of where it came from. So yes, I was an analyst, but more so in an organic fashion.
Brilliant backstory. Thank you. So I feel like you were, I guess from my experience, you were very early to the sort of, profitability analysis.
Sure.
And talking about that. But do you feel that, the kind of, there are obviously a number of other analytics solutions in Shopify world, Triple Whale, obviously particularly well known, Klar, Northbeam. Do you feel like they're also taking the lead and moving towards this profit first analysis? Do you think this fundamentally is a platform that's not what they're focused on?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I would say about all those platforms is they're fantastic tools. They are really, really good products and fantastic, brilliant tools to be able to work with. The challenge, I suppose, I've seen with some of the customers who've come from us in those tools is what are they using it for? Are they using it to inform decision making? And more importantly than that, what is the primary North Star objective within the business? I'll share a quick anecdote with a UK-based business I spoke to about 6 months ago, doing about 25-30 million a year. They had one of these tools in place. I won't name which one. And essentially, the CFO came to us and said, we're working with our agency. We're getting fantastic numbers from this tool every week. Everything is fantastic. But he goes, but we're bleeding money. You can fill in the blank there, but I was kind of saying to him, look, what are we tracking every week? What are we optimizing towards? Are we trying to be profitable? Are we trying to grow? And he said, yes, obviously we're trying to be profitable. So we're trying to say, okay, where are we trying to optimize towards this, or what do we track? Where do we track this every week? Ultimately, what gets tracked gets managed. But if we're not tracking that core fundamental piece every week, it's easy for it to subside or to, have the numbers massaged, should you will. So obviously, those kinds of tools are amazing tools. But what we're trying to do is move brands away from using attribution as their primary North Star and fix, if there is tracking issues in there, fix those first, and more so optimize your business both based on core hard unit economics as opposed to attribution windows. My beef with attribution windows, and I'm obviously heavily biased, is that there is, you can get 20 different versions of attribution in any of these tools, and they're all correct. They're all right. But that doesn't make your decision as a capital allocator within your business any easier. And for us, making that piece easier, where do I spend money? When do I pull back? How do I spend it? That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it trends with a lot of what the stuff we're talking about a little later, which is stop obsessing about how this pie is split down and just make sure you're actually measuring the right size of pie. That's actually set. Because how you attribute to the channels, you say, is very subjective, and there's no objective truth. But how much revenue you're doing, how much profit you're producing is that is objective truth. And if you miss that, then as you say, you go out of business quite quickly. So do your customers tend to use Google Analytics alongside StoreHero for different use cases? How do you see that playing out in your customers?
We do. Yeah, we do. We have a direct integration to GA. So we're now touching, all of our session data in StoreHero. You have the option to pull it from Shopify, but most people are pulling it from GA. Yeah. All the conversion rates are pulling from there. All of our product funnels, the general funnels, all that stuff is pulling through GA. Yeah. We just need GA to be set up correctly, which is maybe not as much as a given as it would have been a couple of years ago. Yeah. But we do, absolutely, yeah.
But so you really see StoreHero as more like the sort of the business metrics layer on top of that. Let's put in their stuff and see how it maps against target. And
for me, personally, we sat down day one, what are the key integrations? And apart from the paid media side, we couldn't really have an e-commerce product, even for how commercially focused it is, without needing GA4 in there, because it's just imperative to really know what's going on.
Now, I think we both know and come across a number of brands on time that, that they turn out to be incredibly confident about their metrics, and when you dig in, they're making it based off completely erroneous assumptions. Obviously, I'm not expecting no names, but can you give us an example of one you've seen that where just the whole business strategy was wrong because they were relying on the wrong metrics?
Yeah, honestly, this is actually a kind of a sad story, to be honest with you. It was a brand that went out of business last year, and we kind of only really spoke to them just before it happened, and it was just like too little too late. Essentially, they had built out a forecast for the year ahead based on an assumed gross margin, and that gross margin turned out to not be as accurate as it actually was. The agency smashed the numbers that they were given and put the business out of business in the process of doing so. And the linchpin in that is somebody assumed a gross margin number that was not the gross margin number. You get to Boots, you buy something off the shelf. There's like the product fee and the transaction fee. In e-commerce, you've got all your discounts, you've got your free shipping or non-shipping, you've got, different fees for different bot payment solutions, you've got 3PLs in there. I call them like little paper cuts. Every time you fulfill an order in e-commerce, it's not just your product costs, that is your gross margin. We kind of have this kind of prism CM1 to 3. Some of your listeners may be familiar with it, just to give a very, very quick breakdown as to what that is and why it's important. So CM1, contribution margin 1, gross margin 1, whatever you want to call it. That's your product cost. That's your product cost only.
Yeah.
It's not your gross margin. That does not get gross margin, because out of that need to come your shipping, your 3PL, your returns if you charge for them, your discounts, your transaction fees. That's your CM2. It's your product and all those little variable fees. And then what we focus on at StoreHero is the CM3, which is, products minus all those little variable fees, minus out all of your marketing budget. So that's the kind of 3 little categorizations of that. But I do see a lot of brands assume that the first product
is gross margin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends slightly on how you come to business. I'm trying to think how we would think about it. I think we would typically think of, when we think for little data perspective, we do think of gross margin as being, I mean, obviously it's difficult with doing software products, isn't it? You don't really have physical product costs in the same way, but actually thinking about it, we do definitely include CM2, so any kind of discounts, revenue share, etc. will come off that. But yeah, it's the contribution of the marketing which is subjective. But before we get on to that, because that's obviously maybe the difficult bit, how easy is it for a Shopify brand to kind of pull? Well, let's ask the question two ways. First of all, how would they pull like CM1 and CM2? How would they gather that data? And is that getting easier in the sense, is that data kind of within the Shopify platform and to be able to pull it from elsewhere?
Yeah, not always, right? So yeah, we have a Shopify app in the App Store just since before Christmas, actually. So that part's a bit easier to get set up. If you have your product costs in Shopify, they'll pull directly in here. Not always the case. So
what percent of brands do you think do? Because when I looked at it like a few years ago, it was very low, like less than 20%, but maybe more people still inventory cost it.
It's funny, the higher up the food chain you go, the less brands have their product costs in Shopify.
Yeah.
So a lot of the smaller brands do, but mainly as you go up the food chain, not as much. So what we typically do there is either use a CSV import or export, or use some of the automation tools in StoreHero to pipe direct information directly from their inventory management system or their ERP system back into StoreHero, in which they'll update in real time. Okay. That's the product piece. We do have like shipping integrations built for ShipStation, ShipBob, Shopify Shipping. If you're not using any of those ones, and a lot of our Irish customers, Irish ecom integrates with nothing, unfortunately. So we were building in a good market because it's a hard market to build for. There's a lot of manual stuff that you can do from a shipping perspective and a 3PL perspective there. Transaction fees all pulling directly from Shopify, irrespective of whether it's Shopify Payments or Klarna or whoever else as well.
And I guess the importance of pulling in shipping costs depends maybe on your AOV. So if you low AOV, it's shipping could be a very big bite out of profit. Whereas if you're high AOV, maybe not. Would be. But I guess it also depends on the type of product. Right, if you're furniture, again, shipping is a big thing. If you're trying to say, "We've got hey,
and how you price your returns. Like if you're fast fashion and you're giving free shipping, free returns, and you have a double handling in your 3PL, that stacks up very fast, particularly if as much as you get the product back, Facebook aren't going to give you a refund on that customer acquisition cost fee either.
I mean, it's one thing that I've pointed out many times. That it's particularly true of some of the subscription brands we work for, where you kind of optimizing. Obviously you expect to lose money on your first order as a subscription, but to do a really tight handle on how your payback period and how long. It's really hard to calibrate your customer acquisition cost against your true profit, because it's not a one-time thing. You have to, yes, every time they ship, there's a shipping cost, there's a product cost, but obviously a one-time marketing cost. So, and what's the, for most of the brands you work with, is it a matter of just sort of adding a CSV, or would you say like increasingly people can use a automated, use an integration
Most of the time, brands don't. Like, we do a small onboarding call, usually takes kind of 15, 20 minutes at the start, but everything is pretty much like the only caveat is if the product costs aren't in Shopify and they don't have the integration set up with the inventory management system or ERP system, then it's a little bit more manual. But for most brands, it's set up once and it's live.
Yeah, cool. And I guess for a lot of brands, they're not the inventory cost isn't changing rapidly, right? It's not a fast moving metric. It's
No, well, you'd be surprised with tariffs over the last 12 months. I wish that was true, but we have had had to adapt, I suppose, to what's going on in the market. But no, you're right. Not a whole lot. Not usually.
okay. So let's talk about the difficult one, CM3, the marketing cost. So obviously, what you touched on is that in reality, you've got a marketing mix. You've got to spend across all these different channels. A little bit arbitrary who gets the credit, but how do you think about trying to allocate that marketing spend to a particular order?
Yeah, we don't do it down to an individual order, to be honest with you. I think you can sometimes get a little bit lost in the weeds from our perspective in that. We have so many brands that come to us thinking that they need an attribution tool to attribute every single order down to every single campaign, when they've no idea of what the core unit economics of the business actually look like. Some brands are, heavily overspending, and there's also a lot of brands, Ed, that are the opposite way. They're heavily under budget and they actually don't know it because all the focus is going to understanding, did this campaign drive this order? And actually nobody knows what the break-even point of the order would have been. Nobody knows what the LTV of that product or that customer was going to be. And therefore spend decisions around what we can afford to spend on customers is often an afterthought. And we're trying to flip the script there and say, yes, that's important. We do show your attribution data as reported in platform. We don't have our own pixel. I think all of that information is still going to be generally directionally correct. If it's faulty, get a platform like yourselves or something else in place to make sure that the connectors are right. Like, sometimes I feel that if we're just trying to solve the attribution equation, it's trying to put lipstick on a pig. If the results there.
Don't get me wrong. I'm on your side of the fence. Little Vegas is not an attribution platform, and while we believe that it's useful to have attribution modeling and Google Analytics and stuff. The primary thing is actually understanding, your overall, are you driving enough your business, and if not, where's it dropping out? So what you're saying is that you would basically just take you pull the total, weekly or monthly budget from Meta, total from Google, total from TikTok, whatever other your spend channels are. What do you think about kind of software costs like Klaviyo as part of that, or is it?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends how variable that fee is. If it's quite variable, I would include it. If it's more of a fixed cost, I'd include it as operating expenses. Yeah, maybe just to go back on that point a little bit, because just around this was the need, or why we don't focus on the attribution equation. In the last couple of years, it's no secret customer acquisition costs are going one way and one way only. That's putting undue pressure on bottom lines of e-com P&Ls all over the world. You're in this situation now, and you guys must see this as well, where the heaviest line item of the whole P&L for a lot of these brands is now the marketing budget, right?
Yeah.
And okay, in that instance, whoever is responsible for deploying this capital on behalf of my business, they're essentially the largest investor in my business. And in no other industry will be allowed the largest investor in the company to be held to account by metrics that are not financially orientated and that can be gamed depending on which attribution window you want to look at. So for me, first and foremost, as a business owner, if I was running an e-com store, I would want to understand, how much did we spend last week? Did we make more profit on that? Then get down into figuring out, okay, where did those orders come from? But if we don't have that core fundamental piece first, it's extremely difficult to confidently spend money and know that we're making the right decisions every week.
Yeah, and I think this gets amplified when you outsource your marketing to an agency, which obviously a lot of the mid-market brands we work with do. So obviously agency, typically they're working on, the performance marketing agency, you're working on a percent of ad spend kind of model. So there's an incredibly, let's say, conflict of interest there, where, if you can justify to the brand that you're getting more orders, obviously you justify them spending more money with you. And so obviously, as you say, going back to attribution, you will find the attribution window and settings, view through attribution 90 days ago, that brings you the most, actually I don't think that's possible, but that view through 30 days, maybe the most aggressive you might get. But that, because that means the brand, is going to get there. And I had this fashion brand we worked with in London sat down with me for coffee a few months ago, and he was saying they did a big collab with Noel Gallagher over the summer, right? And Noel Gallagher posted on his like Instagram, and obviously that got a load of sort of buys. He's like, but our paid media agencies coming to me and saying they drove most of their sales. He's like saying that just can't be true. You know, it can't be true that that Noel Gallagher versus Facebook. And so yeah, I said obviously this the problem. They probably did retarget some of these people, but as we know, you know, if you attribute too much to retargeting, it's like those people were literally in the checkout. They were going to buy, and you served an ad to them. So you really can't take that as a win. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you. It's not that attribution modeling is useless. It's not that it's no, it's not that it's something you shouldn't care about. It's just that it's very much secondary to getting the basic financial metrics right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think in the prism of decision making within a business, it's often at the apex. Very, very top is attribution. But like, is solving attribution directly correlated to your primary objective as a business owner? No, it's not. It does no consideration for your margin. Is no consideration for your bottom line profitability. And if that's what you're trying to grow in your business, you know, maybe you should be tracking that first and foremost. Sometimes people hear the word contribution margin and think I'm sending them off to accountancy boot camp for 6 weeks to become a fully fledged accountant. We're literally trying to understand, did we spend more money? Did we make more money? At its core, yeah, that's it.
I had a really interesting chat with our, we've got a new sort of fractional CMO that's helping us. And yeah, he was advocating for putting kind of marketing spend as a hello metric on a dashboard. And I pushed back and was like, you know, but that's not, could be completely wrong. But he said, look, the thing is, you know, all other things being equal, more marketing spend equals more customers in the door. So I want to know whether we're actually deploying, going back to your point that, you know, in some cases businesses just underspending, they're too cautious. I want to know if we haven't got the leads in, is it because we just didn't deploy the money into marketing? Because that's often the problem, is that, you know, no input, no output. And I think that my other thing with this is that even if you had, let's say you're obsessed about attribution, like, and you want to, I mean, you don't, in the modern world, you don't really have a choice about where you can spend the money. You have to spend on Meta, you have to spend on Google. And so even if, yeah, you discover one is 10% better than the other or whatever, it doesn't really make a big difference about how you allocate. If you want to scale or spend, it has to be all of the above. And I don't think any brands will find that, you know, these channels do nothing for them. The bigger problem, as you say, is do you have enough unit economics to justify the spend? You know, if you have I mean, as you say, like a lot of people who are winning on Meta with the current, you know, not 2015 where there were a lot of money to be made there, but you know, 2025, you ultimately have to have a high enough margin product to justify the ad costs. Right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, for everybody, you guys must speak to loads of agencies as well. Like, the space is becoming quite commoditized from a, you know, what used to be service delivery 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah,
that core piece of what you would have paid an agency retainer for, that's getting commoditized. What isn't going to be commoditized is the strategy piece that sits on top of it. So yeah, going back to that piece, like, if you are deploying huge amounts of capital on behalf of these businesses, you are an investor and you need to treat your job as an investor. And to be honest with you, the agencies that we see absolutely smashing it at the moment are the ones who've recognized that. And they are really heavily leaning into almost being that business consultant that, yeah, we do your paid media as well, but we are a business consultant.
And I think that to add to that, you know, what AI is changing, we're seeing what Meta and Google leaning into is more, you know, Advantage Plus, PMAX campaigns, more automation of, like, so the job of the PPC manager actually deciding on a micro level where the spend is allocated, that is now automated. As you say, the big choice is actually the higher level, just how much money do we pump into different types of campaigns. And as you say, the best agencies are about, I mean, this is true for email marketing as well, you know, the best agencies are the strategics about what is our angle here, what are the best, you know, what are the best messaging to go for. They're not going to micro level of like, how should we lay out the email, because that's what's being automated.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have, like, most of the agencies, we have a forecasting product built into StoreHero now. So essentially, we're trying to work backwards from what's your sales targets, your fixed costs, your profit objective, and we will tell you, based on this is what you can afford to spend on marketing and the efficiency rate that you need. Instead of what happens in a lot of the time is that, you know, brands comes to agency, we say we want to do X amount this year, and they say we need to spend Y to get there, and it's not really grounded in financial best interest, margin structures, you know, CAC payback windows, all this kind of stuff. So we are essentially doing that now with a lot of our agencies, and it's just interesting and honestly refreshing to hear so many agencies now asking their clients about fixed operating expenses, profitability objectives, and digging into explaining what a gross margin is. And sometimes saying, look, what you're looking for here, that's not achievable. And here's why. But if you want to get there, here's the changes that we're going to need to make. It may be gross margin. It could be your profit expectations, or it could be your fixed operating costs, or your top line revenue projection in general. But I think, as negative as that may be perceived for some agencies to have that conversation with their brand, the experience we've seen is the complete opposite. You're put in a real position of strength, and that now we're being challenged about our underlying commercial objectives by somebody who's going to be responsible for deploying a lot of capital. And to tell you one thing, a lot of the agencies are getting a serious amount of respect for having these conversations on the back of it, which is great to see.
Well, to go back to your point, in an increasing commoditized world, it sets you apart to be a true business consultant, not just a sort of, how do we tactically deploy your ad budget?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so to play devil's advocate a bit, let's say I'm marketing director for sort of scaling 7-figure Shopify brand. Like, what do I need a StoreHero type product, or does it really depend on how, maybe what is my CM and what is my gross margin, whether I've got a lot to play with?
First and foremost, I would say, like, if the business objectives are to be profitable and to grow profitability, and you don't have a mechanism to track that right now, I think absolutely.
Well, I mean, isn't that everyone's? I mean,
not all the time. Like, we do have a lot of brands that are entering new markets. It's all about revenue growth. We do have some like VC-backed brands who it's all about revenue growth. So while it's 99, it's 1% of people, 99% of people are in the other bracket. If you're in a position where you're spending a lot on ads, you're not confident in what you're seeing, you're not confident that X doesn't match with Y, are you tracking your bottom line every week? Or are you waiting for a month after the end of the month to get your monthly management accounts, which are going to be read to you by, may not necessarily be an e-commerce orientated financial advisor. What we're really trying to do is just maybe get the bridge between what's going on in your ad account and what's going on with your business from a margin perspective, and just get tracking that first and foremost, because you will learn so much about your business very, very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that change? I mean, the world changed 3 years ago, right, with the end of cheap money. And I do think, before that, I agree, we had a lot of brands just like, how fast can we scale? It's just really, they wanted the latest tool just so simply so they could see the revenue growth. And but I do think that, and it took a couple of years to boil through, but I think 24, 25, we saw this different, just because the funding for, VC-backed D2C brands really dried up. There's very few, obviously there's still some cases, but nothing like the same funding for what is ultimately a low margin business. And so, so I think profitability has become the order of the day. It certainly has been for us, and for many of our customers. So I guess it's been a good space for you to be in, right? You were there, you were early to that shift.
Yeah, it was. Look, we were a small bit early. It was largely driven by, I suppose, from our family business. We're not a big business at all. We couldn't afford to be losing money, and we were just honestly probably right place, right time, and we took a bit of initiative and went for it. So, look, to be honest with you, like, a tougher e-commerce environment for us is better because there is no ambiguity. You don't have room to not know your numbers anymore. You need to be sharp. You need to be on the ball. You need to have a very, very firm understanding on how that money's being spent each week, and if it is within your best interest. So, the brands who are coming on board are really seeing that very, very quickly, and it has been a much better last 18 months than the first kind of 18 months that we would have started, purely because people care a lot more now than they would have, 2 years ago.
Good to hear. So, okay, we touched a little bit on, obviously, because your own family business, SEO was the sort of order of the day, and then usually paid ads. But I think you talked a bit about how this is traditionally a really difficult area, particularly with Google, where there is a bleed from organic into paid and vice versa. And the economics are different, right? SEO is effectively a sort of retainer fixed cost type thing, and paid is a variable spend. So how do you think about trying to split out the profitability of SEO versus paid? Or again, does that just get into the attribution problem?
Look, that's a tricky one. Honestly, the main piece, we actually were working with an influencer brand quite recently, and the example I'll give here is they're based in Los Angeles, big brand, and year over year, last year they'd spent a lot more and revenue was down, etc., etc. But it was actually GA4 that I found the issue. The founder had stopped posting as much as they were in 2024. 2025. And actually the organic slice of the pie, I'd gone from 55% of the traffic to like, I think it was 20%. It was a huge, huge, huge drop off.
Yeah.
But sessions hadn't grown either. So they were spending more money. Facebook was actually performing a bit better than it was, but it was actually the organic piece.
So the founder posts have been driving kind of brand mentions, which been driving, and do that show up as branded search or, or a bit of both?
It was all just coming in as organic directly from GA4. They weren't even running ads behind it in Google. It was literally just organic traffic coming through in the GA4 funnel that we have. We can see obviously the split between organic, paid, CPC traffic, if referral, email, that kind of thing.
I mean, I think it's probably a good segue into kind of how I think you can use Allocator and StoreHero together, because as I said, one of the things that we're unique in the market about is making sure that the Google Analytics data, particularly revenue data, is as accurate as it can be for a Shopify brand. And so, as you say, like you can go and see some stuff in Shopify Analytics, but particularly for sessions and conversion rates, it's quite flaky. The revenue data is obviously correct. Everyone knows that that's the source of truth. And what we're trying to do is be able to have both things accurate in the same place, sessions and revenue, so that you can get more accurate metrics from conversion rate. You can look at CRO, where people drop off, but also, as you say, Google Analytics for if you're doing SEO is still the very important place where you try and figure out, what landing pages and what kind of content was driving that. And so that's really our message, is that we're not, we don't want to be a reporting tool. We're not trying to be a triple whale competitor, although the Sono bit is a bit overlapping. We're just trying to say, look, if attribution is what you want, don't spend loads of money on an expensive tool. Google Analytics set up correctly is what you need. And as you say, if you want to add a metrics layer on top of kind of business dashboard and a profitability analysis, then StoreHero is what you need on top of that. But I think that's so. Would you see that's the way working in terms of sort of? I think you talked before about metrics layer versus or tracking layer versus profit layer.
Yeah, the challenge I see sometimes is if people are looking for an analytics tool to improve the business, they just go straight for the shiny, sexy-looking attribution platform tool. But A, we don't know the unit economics of the brand, and B, we've no idea of the quality of the data that's going into the platform in the first place. So, if the quality of the data isn't there, your sexy dashboard that you're seeing is showing you great numbers and it looks fantastic, but like you haven't fixed the underlying problem whatsoever.
But I feel like platforms like Triple Whale are very addictive to marketers because they are what I call internally consistent. Like the numbers all add up. In fact, that was their original kind of messaging, is they're like, I just want the numbers to add up. Cool. They do solve that. But the problem is it's inconsistent. It doesn't necessarily correlate to the reality that you see in your revenue numbers coming through, because that's not the problem they're trying to solve. They're not syncing with Shopify server side there. They've got their own pixel, their own source of truth. Yeah, it's definitely easier than trying to navigate the reporting in Facebook ads directly. But I think what I see a lot of brands kind of getting disillusioned because it feels like a sort of fake world that they stepped into. It's not that it's wrong. It's just another version of the truth.
Yeah, look, I take my hat off to them. That's an incredible UI and UX that they've built. That maybe you're not necessarily getting the results, but you still feel that you need it all the time. Like that's a really hard product to build.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely agree. It's almost an element of like business gaslighting that you're getting on a weekly basis. Everything always looks great, but going back to that example I had with the CFO, things weren't great, but
you still don't
seem like they were.
Yep. So, for a lot of the brands you work with, how much does the CFO actually get involved? I mean, do they tend to see ad budget as sort of a amorphous spend, a sort of uncontrollable bet, or do you see some businesses them getting much deeper into like the mechanics of it?
Yeah, like this concept of like CFOs, and in particular fractional CFOs, is really taken off. And to be honest, it makes sense. Like nobody thinks anything of outsourcing their marketing to an agency because they're experts in what they do. But for a lot of the time, and I can speak openly about this because, that's my dad, essentially. While he's an accountant and he's great at that, he's never before our business worked with an e-commerce business. So he's not fluid on what CAC means, or, CAC payback windows, or what a cost per click means relative to a CPM, all this kind of stuff. Where now you have this kind of, plethora of fractional e-commerce, fractional CFOs specifically for e-commerce brands. And I think it's a breath of fresh air for the industry, because it makes so much sense. If you are spending this much money, e-com is a really difficult, cash-intensive financial business.
Yeah.
And if you have John down the road, who's your local accountant managing your business, he's probably also helping, the local builder, the butcher, the baker, whoever it is as well, with their businesses. Your business is really, really different. If you're outsourcing your marketing to a marketing team because they're experts at what you do there, you can do so much by employing somebody on a fractional basis to get them to help you with your budgets for the year ahead. Just to your point, the good fractional CFOs that we're seeing, I mean, they're unbelievable. Like, they're advising everything from, how to get out of trouble with Meta overspends, or budgets that we owe Meta, how to pick the best lending partner, how to get a good cash conversion cycle and why that matters, how to keep tabs on your agency when they're overspending. These are all questions that CFOs will just cut to the mustard. They don't really care about a lot of the fluffy stuff, rightly or wrongly. They will cut straight down the middle and get to the point a lot of the time. And it's something I'm seeing taking off in the States quite a lot. And it's starting to filter its way through here too.
No, I think it's a great idea. And then to your previous point, for a lot of consumer brands, the spend with Meta and stuff is very, very meaningful. Like, profitability was the biggest contribution, sometimes even more than the actual product costs. And so it's not a sort of like second order concern. It's actually, as the finance person, it's your first order concern. And obviously it's actually the only thing you can really control, because given the product, it's probably quite hard to crunch down on manufacturing costs, etc. Okay, finally, let's talk about one other thing that's coming up in the Shopify ecosystem that we're working on a lot at the moment, which is the sort of shift to Shopify Markets. So obviously, like previously, you were trading internationally as a larger brand, you'd have multiple country stores, you'd have all of the inventory costs separately in their stores, and then that store was sort of its own thing, its own world. And obviously, with markets, like, in terms of managing the store, it becomes easier because it's all centralized in one store, and you just split the inventory and localization stuff. But for us, maybe for you, it actually makes the data problem harder, because it's all merged now into all those different inventory costs and stuff merged into one store.
Yeah. We actually launched a markets feature about 18 months ago for this reason. So when you log in now, you have a really, really good breakdown of, we've kind of done it twofold, right? So you have obviously your country level breakdown is pulling in your transaction fees minus the FX rates, price changes, all that mark. But it's also pulling in automatically from Facebook and Google where your money was spent. So you don't need to set it up by naming convention or anything else like that. So we know in, Ireland last week, you did X amount of sales. This was your GP. This was your automatic ad spend that got attributed from the platforms to this country. Therefore, this is your country level CAC, country level contribution margin, country level GP. And that just helps you really understand where you're overspending, underspending, and, maybe where there's opportunities and corners to see around.
I mean, one of the things that we're solving for, and I think it is relevant to what you just said, is that a lot of countries want to have centralized store management and inventory and stuff, but they want to have local ad budgets and local ad accounts. So what Little Data can do from this quarter is to basically split out your, let's say you have 5 markets globally, you can have a separate Facebook ad account for each one and have separate pixel, and because that's actually what's necessary, I think, for a lot of brands. It's sometimes it's a management point of view, because they just actually have different agencies and stuff working in its markets. But it's sometimes just for a measurement and profit point of view that some markets are high market. You made the point earlier, like sometimes it's a new market growth, like you want to manage it completely differently to a established saturated market where you need profit.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more with that. We're actually launching a similar feature at the moment, bringing multiple ad accounts for different regions for literally that exact same region as well. So no, that makes a ton of sense.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we had time for, but thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. StoreHero, brilliant if you want to understand how profitable you are across the business, which is, I think, everyone in the modern day. And so if you're a VC background, get on that now before everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, Thomas.
Listen, Ed, thank you so much for having me on today. Really, really looking forward to listening to this one back. And very, very best of luck with everything.
Yes. Bye.